More than 100 years ago, America became obsessed with an idea. If we built enough dams, we could solve almost every problem, stop floods, grow food, provide electricity, and always have enough water. So that's what we did. Dams descended like locusts on almost every river in the nation. Some dams rose higher than skyscrapers, and entire valleys and towns disappeared underwater. And they did solve some of the problems they were meant to solve, at least temporarily. But today in the American West, these monuments to progress tell a very different story. Lakes are half empty, the rivers below them are dying, and we're running out of water. So how did something once seen as the future of America backfire so badly? To understand how this disaster unfolded, let me show you one place where you can see it all. I'm at Flaming Gorge on the Utah-Wyoming border, looking down at what used to be one of the most spectacular river canyons in America. The Green River carved through sandstone walls, creating a landscape bathed in vibrant red. These beautiful colors inspired John Wesley Powell to name it the Flaming Gorge during his famous 1869 expedition. But in 1962, that all changed when the Bureau of Reclamation started building a 502-foot concrete dam. Beneath 91 miles of artificial lake lies a drowned world, buried cottonwood groves, archaeological sites, and river beaches that supported wildlife for thousands of years. Floyd Dominy, the Bureau of Reclamation commissioner who buried this gorge, called the dam his crown jewel when it opened in 1963. The project cost $115 million and came with grand promises: a reliable water supply for Utah and Wyoming, 151 megawatts of electricity, flood control, and bountiful trout fishing. But here's what Dominy didn't advertise. His plan to bring sport fishing would start with eliminating the West's great wild fish. Utah and Wyoming deliberately poisoned over 450 miles of the Green River with a chemical called rotenone, which is toxic to fish. This project was officially called rehabilitation, but involved killing every native fish to make room for other fish species people would pay to catch, especially trout and salmon. The native species targeted for destruction had lived in this river system for millions of years. There were 4 of them: the Colorado pike minnow, which grew up to 6 feet long, the razorback sucker with its distinctive high back, the humpback chub, adapted to navigate turbulent rapids, and the bony-tailed chub, streamlined for life in fast water. Officials called them trash fish and worthless native species. They considered them merely obstacles to kick out of the way for the recreation economy they desired. But today, more than 6 years later, the federal government has spent over $100 million trying to save these same fish from extinction. These 4 ancient species that once thrived now need massive artificial breeding programs and constant intervention to survive. And that's because of the dam. The dam blocks their migration routes. It releases water at a constant 55 degrees rather than the warm, muddy flows the fish evolved with. It completely eliminates the spring floods that trigger spawning. But the fish are just the beginning of what went wrong here. The human cost was just as devastating. People living in the nearby town of Linwood were forced to leave their homes as the waters rose. And the archaeology? Hundreds of prehistoric sites vanished underwater, including evidence of Fremont culture. In a hurried effort known as salvage archaeology, teams documented what they could, but most of it is simply gone forever. Building the dam sacrificed all of these things to store water in a man-made lake, but the water isn't even staying put. Between 2022 and 2023, the Bureau released 500,000 acre-feet of water to help fill Lake Powell downstream. As a result, the Flaming Gorge Reservoir dropped from 3.2 million acre-feet to 2.4 million. And the water levels are still dropping, sometimes an inch per day. But this pattern of destruction didn't start here. To understand how we made these same catastrophic mistakes over and over again across the West, we need to go back to where the obsession began. The year is 1902, and America is drunk on possibility. The country is connected by railroads, cities are exploding in size, and engineers are convinced they can conquer nature itself. When Congress passed the Reclamation Act that year, it wasn't just legislation, it was a declaration of war against the natural world. And that idea was intoxicating. People wanted to move west, but huge areas of land were off limits because the conditions were too harsh. There wasn't enough water to drink or to grow food. But this land could be reclaimed for people by building dams. Dams would tame rivers and turn the desert green, paving the way for more settlers. Between 1900 and 1970, America went on an ambitious dam building spree. In those 70 years, the nation constructed approximately 46,000 dams, an average of nearly 2 dams every single day. Dam construction in the West was funded by Congress and led by the Bureau of Reclamation, the most powerful agency most Americans had never heard of. They could force people out of their homes and reshape river systems that had existed for millions of years, all to build a dam. And they did it with the absolute certainty that they were saving the American West. And at the time, it looked like progress. But if Flaming Gorge showed the devastating pattern of America's dam obsession, our next stop represents the ultimate tragedy, the loss of what many considered to be the most beautiful place in America.
I'm here at Lake Powell standing at the Glen Canyon Dam. Now, do you see that white ring extending 185 feet up the canyon wall? That's the most visible marker that this dam isn't working like it was intended to.
This 710-foot concrete wall was completed in 1966, creating the second largest reservoir in America. David Brower was the Sierra Club director at the time, and he agreed to this dam as a political compromise. But he hadn't visited Glen Canyon before making that deal. After finally seeing it, he spent the rest of his life calling his concession his greatest sin, and the dam America's most regretted environmental mistake. Construction began in 1956 when President Eisenhower, far away in Washington, D.C., pressed a telegraph key to detonate the first dynamite blast. It took until 1980, 17 years later, for Lake Powell to finally reach its full capacity. By then, it had submerged 186 miles of the Colorado River's main channel and 125 major side canyons. What lay beneath these waters was a wonderland that photographer Elliot Porter documented in his haunting book, The Place No One Knew, published just as the flooding began. One piece of the drowned landscape was a natural sandstone amphitheater with a 60-foot waterfall. Named Cathedral in the Desert, Brower called it the ultimate magical place in Glen Canyon. In a twist of poetic justice, it has recently re-emerged as the water levels in Lake Powell dropped to historic lows. For the first time in decades, you can walk into this natural cathedral again, though it bears the scars of 40 years underwater. The archaeological catastrophe here was even more staggering than at Flaming Gorge. Over 2,000 Native American sites dating back to the years 750 to 1250 were destroyed, including ancestral Puebloan ruins, petroglyphs, and sacred sites of the Diné, Hopi, Zuni, and Paiute people.
But each year, Glen Canyon's broken promises become clearer. Every year, Lake Powell loses 1 million acre-feet of water to evaporation and to seepage. That's enough water for 2 million households.
Since 1963, more than 34 million acre-feet of water has been lost, worth approximately $9 billion. And these losses are expected to get worse as climate change drives more evaporation. Meanwhile, the dam traps 45 million tons of sediment every year, preventing the sediment from continuing downstream. Rivers need this material to maintain beaches, support wildlife habitat, and maintain their structure. After a dam is built, the natural order of a river is destroyed. Water is allowed to flow downstream, but the sediment stays behind. This devastates native fish populations while enabling invasive species to thrive. Today, Lake Powell is only about 30% full. The dam can't generate power when water levels drop below 3,490 feet. And at 3,370 feet, the ominous dead pool level, water no longer flows through the dam by gravity. It was built to secure the Colorado River system for centuries, but it might not survive another decade. But Glen Canyon wasn't the first time America sacrificed an irreplaceable landscape for the promise of progress. To understand how this pattern began, we need to travel to California, to the place where the battle over America's rivers was fought and lost a century ago. The road into Yosemite's backcountry winds through forests that John Muir called God's first temples. But I'm not headed to the famous valley that draws millions of visitors. I'm going to a place that represents the original sin of America's dam obsession, the only time in US history a dam was built inside a national park. This is Hetch Hetchy, and the battle fought here between 1901 and 1913 established the template for every environmental compromise that followed.
This concrete archway behind me is 430 feet tall and holds back 117 billion gallons of Sierra Nevada snowmelt. By any measure, it's an engineering marvel. It delivers water from here 167 miles through aqueducts and tunnels to the San Francisco Bay Area, delivering some of the cleanest municipal water in America. But despite being a marvel, it's also a tomb.
The O'Shaughnessy Dam behind me created an 8-mile reservoir. It covers what used to be a 3-mile-long valley with meadows and spectacular waterfalls. Wapama Falls at 1,080 feet and Tuiulala Falls at 840 feet. This all now lies beneath 300 feet of water. The flowery meadows that gave the Hetch Hetchy Valley its name, along with groves of black oak, ponderosa pine, and Douglas fir that supported hundreds of species, vanished forever when the reservoir filled in May 1923. San Francisco's devastating 1906 earthquake and fire provided the political catalyst for this destruction. The city's water system failed catastrophically during the disaster, and politicians seized on public fear to push through a project they had been pursuing since 1901. John Muir's passionate opposition produced one of the most famous quotes in conservation history. "Damn Hetch Hetchy. As well damn for water tanks the people's cathedrals and churches, for no holier temple has ever been consecrated by the heart of man." Muir mobilized the first modern environmental campaign. He gained support from 200 newspapers and built a coalition that included women's clubs and hiking organizations across America. For 12 years, he fought this dam with every tool available, and he lost. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Raker Act on December 19, 1913, authorizing construction.
John Muir fought this decision until his death a year later, calling it a monumental mistake and warning that if Hetch Hetchy could be dammed, no national park would ever truly be safe.
But here's the bitter irony that makes Hetch Hetchy's destruction even more tragic. Alternatives existed. A 1913 report from the Army Corps of Engineers acknowledged that other water sources were available. Dam opponents seized on this, arguing the valley's destruction was unnecessary. However, dam proponents successfully used the same report's cost analysis, which concluded building a dam across Hetch Hetchy was about $20 million cheaper than any other feasible project, to win the political argument. Modern economic analysis suggests the costs were far greater than the benefits. A 2019 study suggested that restoring Hetch Hetchy could generate as much as $9 billion for the economy. Yosemite Valley receives 4 million visitors annually, while the Hetch Hetchy Valley sees only 44,000, a stark illustration of lost potential. Yet Muir's death was not in vain. Public outrage over Hetch Hetchy led directly to the creation of the National Park Service in 1916, with explicit language that parks must be preserved unimpaired for future generations. The destruction of the Hetch Hetchy Valley paradoxically ensured no dam would ever again violate a national park. So here's the real question. Was it worth it? The numbers don't lie, and they're getting worse every year. Every year we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on emergency water transfers, endangered species protection, and maintenance to keep these aging dams functional. At Flaming Gorge, the emergency releases to prop up Lake Powell have dropped water levels so dramatically that marina operators are running out of places to move their facilities. But perhaps most damning, no pun intended, is that there was a fundamental flaw in the dam builders' logic. They based their calculations on an abnormally wet period in the 1900s, assuming that rivers could be controlled and water supplies would be guaranteed through their engineering. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 and later treaties divide the Colorado River's water between the upper and lower basin states and Mexico. These agreements established how much water each of them had a right to claim. But the calculations overestimated how much water was usually available from the river. They used data from one of the wettest periods in the past 1,200 years and estimated the total volume of water was 16.5 million acre-feet. But tree ring studies have since revealed that the river's actual long-term average is closer to 13.5 to 15 million acre-feet. So we built a water allocation system based on fantasy, then constructed massive infrastructure to support that fantasy. And now reality is demanding payment. At Lake Powell, the reservoir that was supposed to guarantee water security for the Southwest is approaching dead pool levels. That bathtub ring sinks deeper every year. The recreation economy that these dams were supposed to create face an existential crisis. The man-made lakes that were supposed to be economic engines are becoming economic liabilities. But there's one place out west where a different choice was made, where people fought the dam builders and won. And what they saved offers a glimpse of what the American West could have been if we had chosen differently. The Yampa River flows wild and free through Dinosaur National Monument, carving through canyons that rival anything Glen Canyon ever offered.
This is one of the last free-flowing rivers in the West, and the only reason it exists is because environmentalists won one of the most epic battles in American history.
In 1950, that Bureau of Reclamation announced plans for Echo Park Dam, a 529-foot concrete wall that would have stood at where the Green and Yampa rivers come together. The dam would have created a 6.4 million acre-foot reservoir, flooding 63 miles of the Green River and 45 miles up the Yampa, submerging the heart of Dinosaur National Monument. But that announcement was met with a 6-year battle that revolutionized environmental activism and taught conservationists how to fight and win. David Brower of the Sierra Club pioneered what critics called coffee table propaganda. He collaborated with Wallace Stegner to publish This is Dinosaur in 1955, a stunning book that combined essays by prominent writers with breathtaking photography. The Sierra Club organized float trips to show politicians the canyon's beauty and accessibility. But the turning point came during a 1954 congressional hearing when Brower exposed a devastating error in the Bureau's calculations. Using their own figures, he proved that Echo Park Dam would actually lose more water to evaporation than alternative sites. The Bureau was forced to admit their mistake, destroying their primary technical justification for the location. This mathematical demolition, combined with mounting public pressure from thousands of letters and telegrams, forced politicians to abandon the project. On April 11, 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Colorado River Storage Project Act, with specific language that no dam or reservoir constructed under the authorization of this chapter shall be within any national park or monument. The conservationists had won, though at a price. Glen Canyon was sacrificed in the compromise.
But what Dinosaur National Monument preserved is more valuable than anyone could have imagined in the 1950s. Here, the Yampa River maintains its natural flood cycle, reaching spring volumes that can exceed 33,000 cubic feet per second.
This natural rhythm supports the same 4 endangered species that were poisoned at Flaming Gorge, except here they persist in their best remaining habitat. The free-flowing river sustains rare cottonwood and box elder forests, provides critical breeding habitat, and supports populations of beaver, river otter, bighorn sheep, and black bear. Archaeological sites dating back more than 9,000 years, including Fremont petroglyphs and ancient settlements, remain intact along the canyon walls. Standing here at Echo Park, where Steamboat Rock rises 750 feet above where the two rivers meet, you can see what the American West could have looked like if we had made different choices. This landscape generates millions of dollars in sustainable tourism revenue through world-class whitewater rafting and fishing, likely exceeding what any dam would have produced in power generation. The victory at Dinosaur did more than just save a river. It created a template for environmental activism that defeated proposed dams in the Grand Canyon and led directly to the Wilderness Act of 1964. It proved that seemingly essential water projects often had viable alternatives, that remote wilderness areas had value beyond what you could cut down or dig out, and that organized citizens could defeat the combined forces of government agencies and development companies. And most importantly, it demonstrated that rivers have their own logic, their own ways of creating value that engineering can't improve on. These landscapes tell such different stories. At Glen Canyon, Lake Powell sits half empty, its bathtub ring growing deeper every year as billions of dollars of water evaporate into the desert air. At Flaming Gorge, emergency releases drain the reservoir to prop up this failing system downstream. At Hetch Hetchy, a valley as beautiful as Yosemite lies forever entombed beneath concrete and water. But here at Dinosaur, the Yampa runs free, supporting wildlife that has vanished elsewhere, sustaining the economies that man-made lakes were supposed to create, preserving the cultural sites that other dams destroyed. There was a fundamental arrogance at the center of our dam building obsession. The belief that engineers could improve on 4 billion years of evolution, that concrete and steel could outsmart geology and biology, that human cleverness could guarantee abundance in a desert. The Colorado River system that was supposed to be secured for centuries may not survive another decade. And perhaps most tragically, we had the evidence that these projects would fail before we even built them. The mathematical errors that were exposed at Echo Park existed at every dam. The alternatives that would have been cheaper existed for every project. The ecological warnings were there for anyone who cared. We chose not to listen, and we chose poorly.
But standing here where the Yampa meets the Green, watching waters that have never been tamed, you can get a glimpse of what we could have had. A West where the canyons remained undrowned, where ancient fish still grew to 6 feet long, where the rivers still ran free.
It's a vision worth fighting for, because in the end, rivers know how to be rivers and engineers are just interfering. And the only way forward might be to finally admit what the evidence has been telling us for over a century. Sometimes the best thing we can build is nothing at all.